May marks Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And on CBS Sunday Morning, I reported on the connection between California's donut culture and Cambodian Americans. Roughly 80% of the donut shops in California, that's well over 1,000, are owned by Cambodian refugee families. They arrived in America in the late 1970s and early 80s, fleeing a genocide carried out by the Communist Khmer Rouge regime. Many who escaped settled in California, found work in donut shops, and helped reshape the state's donut culture. One innovation, they bypassed expensive white boxes and opted for cheaper pink ones, and in the process, created an icon of sweetness.
Dorothy Chow manages a donut supply company. The daughter of Cambodian refugees, she grew up working in several of her parents' stores.
Nice to see you.
And considers herself a donut kid.
I mean, there were some days that I worked maybe 12, 13, 14-hour days. But then now as I'm older, I can look back at it with pride. Like I am a part of something bigger. I am part of this whole journey that our parents have been on. They came here with nothing. They needed all the help that they could with the donut shop, and we were there to help them and support them whenever we can.
A story which is now being unboxed.
That common shared experience of the donut is very American.
Phung Huynh is a Cambodian-American artist who came to America as a refugee.
A lot of the work are portraits.
In her exhibit, Donut Hole, at Self-Help Graphics and Art in Los Angeles, she uses a pink donut box instead of a white canvas to capture a taste of the Cambodian-American refugee experience.
It's not canvas, it's a throwaway cardboard box. Underneath the sweet of the donut is actually intergenerational trauma and pain.
And joining me now are Phung Huynh and Dorothy Chow. Welcome to you both. So Dorothy, Phung mentioned this notion of trauma. You started a podcast called Death in Cambodia, Life in America. It's a series of one-on-one conversations between you and your dad, Robert, about his life, starting from when he was 14 and the Khmer Rouge took over Cambodia, through his life here in America, building a business empire. Why did you want to have these discussions with him?
Well, to me, I had always been curious about my father's story. Throughout my life, I had heard little snippets here and there that he'd share at the dinner table, but they were very, very brief. And especially when COVID happened, I had realized that at this point, probably the majority of the refugees are gone. Either they're in old age or they're getting to that point where they're just not around anymore. And it hit me during COVID that we only have so much time to really capture these stories. We only have whatever's left. And since not many people know about the Khmer Rouge, it felt to me as almost a calling for me to start this podcast.
Well, in one of the episodes, your dad recounts how when the Khmer Rouge was taking over, he was actually not with his mother, father, and siblings. He'd gone to a different area where it wasn't clear what was going to happen. Now, he was just 14, so instead of fleeing to the border, his entire family stayed put. They waited for him to come home, and they lost their chance to escape. Here now is a clip of your father reflecting on that moment when, as a boy, he realized the gravity of the situation.
In my mind, I think my parents will be tortured or killed soon because of the one person I knew. I was feel bad. I feel horrified.
Guilty,
yes.
Dorothy, you told me your dad used to have nightmares. Does he still have them now, or do you think talking about it has helped him?
Talking about it has absolutely helped him. Storytelling, from what I've learned through this podcast, is incredibly powerful. We had no idea when we started this podcast, that this was actually going to heal him, and not only him, but it healed me. I was able to learn about his story and have empathy for my parents, have empathy for my father, because before this, I never knew what he survived. I had no idea what he had to live through. And so now with the podcast, being able to flesh out exactly the horrific things that he had lived through, I feel healed, and he feels healed as well.
We should mention some of those photos that we just saw where your father still bears the scars of the torture that he experienced. So it's interesting, when you look at the data, 13% of Cambodians and Cambodian-Americans live in poverty, compared to 10% of all Asians in the U.S. Now, that's according to a Pew analysis of government stats from 2019. Phung, you made it a point to include portraits of not only refugees who did find stability in this country, but also those who did not. Tell us about one of those people, Kosel Kiev.
I came across the story of Kosel Kiev, as a fellow Khmer-American as well. And I was just really drawn to how his story does not fit into the model minority narrative of East Asian and East Asian Americans. And so for my family being the first Cambodian and Vietnamese to arrive, we didn't have anybody to really help us out. And so he was born in a Thai refugee camp to Cambodian refugees. And he resettled in the Southern California area in over-policed and violent neighborhoods where he didn't have resources to succeed in school. And he joined a gang and involved in a shootout at age 16 and then served 20 years in prison. And after serving that sentence, he was immediately deported to Cambodia, to a country that he was connected, that is his cultural identity by birth, but he didn't speak the language and he didn't connect. So he was othered and an outcast, really. And so I was really drawn to that narrative and wanted to explain and storytell like Dorothy, but through art.
Right, and in fact, Phung, you interviewed Dorothy, and as we said in the piece, we didn't get to show it there, Dorothy is the subject of one of your portraits and one of your pieces. I'm wondering, Dorothy, what is it that you hope people will ultimately take away from this podcast, which, I'm only a few episodes in, but it is incredibly powerful, incredibly intimate, hearing about your father's experiences.
Yeah, there are two main goals that I have for this podcast. One is, after learning that we can heal from storytelling, I want to show the rest of the refugees this blueprint, that storytelling is powerful. They believed that shoving down their traumas would actually make it disappear, but it didn't. And it's been long enough. They deserve a chance to let go and live life without the shackles of their demons. So I want to share this with everybody, that storytelling is good. And the second goal that I have is essentially healing generational trauma through this podcast. I want to build the bridge between American child and refugee parent and let there be more empathy and heal relationships that may have been broken through the fact that these children live their lives thinking that that their childhood wasn't to their expectations.
Phung, what about you? I wonder what the reaction has been to your exhibit. What do you hope people might think about when looking at your art?
Well, of course, as an artist, I always want to connect with the viewer and hope that the art resonates with them in a powerful way and that our stories interconnect and interlace. Similar to Dorothy, my art is about storytelling, and it is also about healing. And as a mother myself, I worry that our stories are not going to be remembered, that I won't be able to pass this down to my sons and their children. But more importantly, other than passing down, when the genocide happened, not only were people killed, but our culture was at threat as well. And art is a very important cornerstone. It's the heart. Art is the heart of culture. And so for me, by expressing the story and what we've been through and our culture through art, it's really preserving our expression and preserving who we are.
Dorothy Chow and Phung Huynh. Dorothy's podcast, again, is called Death in Cambodia, Life in America. Phung's exhibit in Los Angeles at Self-Help Graphics and Arts is Donut Hole. It's really a pleasure to talk to you both again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.